0500 hours, Macclesfield Bank, South China Sea. A heavy, suffocating fog presses down on the water, obscuring the horizon in every direction. The humidity is oppressive, slicking the steel decks of the Allied destroyer with thick condensation. Inside the Combat Information Center, the low hum of high-voltage cooling fans and the soft green glow of radar screens provide the only sensory input. Crew members sit hunched over their consoles, faces illuminated by the flickering digital displays. It is a ghost shift, the quietest hour before the sun attempts to burn through the mist. The ocean swells are gentle, rocking the massive hull with a rhythmic, sleepy motion. A junior sailor wipes a ring of coffee from a metal console. A single sharp tone pierces the quiet. The radar operator leans forward, eyes narrowing. He wipes the screen with a gloved hand, but the contact remains. A red diamond flickers into existence on the primary surface search display. It is close. It moves with deliberate speed, cutting a straight line toward the center of the exclusion zone. The operator calls out the bearing, his voice cracking slightly before finding a hard edge. The tactical action officer freezes, a pen hovering over his logbook. He snaps an order to the bridge. The contact is not transmitting an identification code. It is running dark. The general quarters alarm shreds the silence. The electronic wail screams through the passageways, bouncing off the metal bulkheads with deafening intensity. The destroyer wakes up instantly. Sailors tumble out of their racks, feet finding boots in the darkness. Red emergency lights bathe the corridors in the color of blood. Watertight doors slam shut with heavy metallic thuds, the locking wheels spinning as crewmen seal the ship for combat. On the bridge, the captain steps out onto the starboard wing. The wind whips at his uniform. He raises his binoculars, staring into the impenetrable gray wall of fog. The deck plates vibrate beneath his feet as the ship's massive gas turbine engines roar to full power. The destroyer heels sharply to starboard, the bow cutting a deep trench into the water as it accelerates to intercept the intruder. White foam sprays over the forward gun mount. The 5-inch deck gun swivels rapidly, its barrel hunting for a target it cannot yet see. "Contact is closing," the radio talker yells over the wind. Range, 2,000 yards. Speed, 40 knots. The captain grips the railing. The vibration increases. The ship shudders as it pushes against the resistance of the sea. Out in the mist, a shadow forms. It is jagged and dark, darker than the surrounding fog. A bow wave erupts from the gloom, churning the water into a frothy white boil. The shape solidifies. It is a hostile patrol boat, low in the water and bristling with antennas. It charges head-on. It does not turn. It does not slow down. The distance collapses rapidly. The patrol boat's engines scream, a high-pitched whine that cuts through the rumble of the destroyer. On the deck of the hostile vessel, crewmen scramble to uncover a heavy machine gun. The Allied captain shouts a command to the helm. The destroyer leans further, biting into the waves, attempting to shoulder the smaller boat away from its course. The two vessels rush toward a collision point. The air smells of salt, unburnt diesel fuel, and impending violence. The gap closes to mere meters. 0515 hours, Macclesfield Bank, point of impact. The gap between the two vessels vanishes. The roar of the engines is drowned out by the anticipation of the crash. Spray from the bow of the patrol boat drenches the sailors on the destroyer's lower deck. The gray steel hull of the smaller vessel fills the entire field of view. It is too late to turn. The patrol boat slams into the starboard side of the destroyer. The sound is deafening, a high-pitched shriek of tearing metal that vibrates through the soles of every sailor's boots. The destroyer shudders violently, knocking the bridge crew off balance. Steel buckles and folds like paper. Paint strips away instantly, replaced by the raw friction of grinding iron. Sparks cascade down the side of the hull in a blinding shower, hissing as they hit the churning black water. The patrol boat rebounds slightly, but scrapes along the length of the larger ship, gouging a deep trench in the plating. "Brace for impact!" the executive officer yells, gripping the overhead console. "Starboard lookouts, report!" On the patrol boat, a hostile gunner struggles to keep his footing on the heaving deck. He swings the heavy mount around. The barrel levels at the destroyer's exposed bridge wing. He squeezes the trigger. A burst of heavy caliber rounds erupts from the muzzle. The bullets hammer against the destroyer's superstructure, punching jagged holes in the steel. Glass shatters in the bridge windows, spraying the officers inside with razor-sharp fragments. A lookout on the signal deck collapses, clutching a shredded shoulder. Blood sprays across the white bulkhead. "Weapons free! Engage! Engage!" The Allied tactical officer screams into the radio handset. The response is instantaneous. The crew on the destroyer's starboard machine gun mount racks the bolt. The weapon roars to life. A stream of red tracer rounds slashes through the fog, connecting the two ships with a line of fire. The heavy rounds chew through the fiberglass hull of the patrol boat. They walk the fire up the deck, tearing through fuel drums and rigging. The tracers find the patrol boat's bridge. The windows explode outward. The rounds punch through the thin armor, decimating the interior. The control console disintegrates in a shower of sparks and plastic debris. The hostile coxswain is hurled backward, his chest ruined by the impact. The boat veers wildly to the left, out of control. It scrapes one last time against the destroyer's aft quarter, tearing a lifeboat free from its davits. The lifeboat crashes into the sea, tumbling end over end. The patrol boat drifts away into the mist, its engine sputtering. Smoke begins to pour from its cabin, thick and black. The firing stops abruptly. The only sound is the heavy breathing of the gun crews and the groaning of bent metal. 0530 hours, Macclesfield Bank, radar horizon. The burning patrol boat drifts astern, a black smudge fading into the fog. On the Allied destroyer, damage control parties rush across the slick deck. They drag fire hoses and heavy timber shoring beams. The smell of ozone and cordite hangs heavy in the air. The captain wipes a smear of blood from his cheek, a shallow cut from flying glass. He ignores it. He stares at the tactical display. The red diamond of the patrol boat is blinking out, but new contacts are blooming on the outer ring. Multiple fast movers inbound, bearing 180. The radar operator shouts, his voice rising an octave. Vampire, 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 inbound missiles detected. 30 miles to the south, the fog breaks. Two hostile frigates emerge from a squall line, their bows cutting the water like knives. Smoke erupts from their vertical launch cells. A volley of anti-ship cruise missiles blasts into the sky, riding pillars of white fire. They climb briefly, then tip over, dropping low to skim the waves. They accelerate to high subsonic speeds, closing the distance in seconds. The Allied destroyer's defense systems react faster than human thought. The Aegis combat system locks onto the threats. The deck launchers open with a mechanical clatter. Birds away! Standard missiles erupt from the destroyer's forward tubes. They roar upward, trailing thick plumes of exhaust that temporarily blind the bridge crew. The ship shudders under the recoil. The interceptors streak downrange, correcting their course mid-flight to meet the incoming death. 0532 hours. The sky lights up. 3 miles out, the first interceptor meets a hostile missile. A massive fireball blooms in the gray mist, instantly followed by a concussive shockwave that ripples the ocean's surface. A second explosion follows, then a third. Debris rains down into the sea. But one missile survives. It hugs the waves, flying below the radar horizon of the interceptors. It jinks left, then right, confusing the targeting solution. It is a sea skimmer, lethal and fast. It bores in on the destroyer's escort, a smaller Allied frigate steaming 2,000 yards off the port bow. The frigate's close-in weapon system, CIWS, spins up. The rotary cannon emits a terrifying buzzsaw roar, spitting tungsten rounds at 4,500 shots per minute. A wall of tracers reaches out to grab the missile. The rounds spark off the water, creating a chaotic spray. The missile weaves through the fire. It is too close. Brace! 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 The missile strikes the frigate amidships, just above the waterline. The warhead detonates. The explosion is catastrophic. It tears a gaping hole in the hull, peeling back thick steel plating like a sardine can. A fireball engulfs the midsection of the ship, instantly vaporizing the external communications arrays. The shockwave lifts the 4,000-ton vessel, slamming it back down with a bone-jarring crash. The frigate lists violently to port. Black smoke billows upward, choking the sky. Debris, metal shards, insulation, burning life rafts, catapults hundreds of feet into the air before raining down on the churning water. 0600 hours, 400 feet below the surface. The ocean here is black, silent, and crushing. Inside the high-tensile steel pressure hull of the Allied attack submarine, the air is scrubbed clean and chilled. Red lighting bathes the control room. The crew moves with practiced, silent efficiency. There is no shouting, only the rhythmic click of switches and the hum of the electric drive. The sonar operator presses the headphones tight against his ears. He listens to the chaotic acoustic signature from above, the groaning of the sinking frigate and the high-speed screws of the hostile ships. Solution ready, the weapons officer states. His voice is flat. Target designated, hostile flagship. Range, 12,000 yards. The captain leans over the digital plot table. He nods once. Match bearings. Flood tubes 1 and 2. A heavy mechanical clank resonates through the hull as the outer doors slide open. Seawater rushes into the torpedo tubes, equalizing the pressure instantly. The submarine shudders slightly as tons of water displace the air. The ship becomes a loaded gun. Open outer doors, shoot tube 1. The launch system triggers. High-pressure air expands explosively behind the weapon. The submarine bucks backward against the recoil, the deck plates vibrating beneath the crew's feet. Tube 1 away. Shoot tube 2. A second jolt rocks the vessel. 2 heavy torpedoes eject from the bow. Their counter-rotating propellers bite into the water, spinning up to maximum RPM in seconds. They shed their guidance wires, transitioning to active homing. The weapons accelerate, leaving a trail of turbulent water in their wake. They drop deep, hugging the thermal layers to hide their approach. On the surface, the hostile frigates are maneuvering to finish off the damaged Allied ship. They do not hear the death approaching from below. The torpedoes close the distance at 50 knots. Their active sonar pingers activate. Ping! Ping! The sound travels through the water like a hammer blow. The hostile sonar screens light up with the incoming threat. Panic erupts on the enemy bridge. The hostile flagship turns hard to port, its rudder jamming over. It dumps countermeasure decoys into the water, noisemakers designed to confuse the guidance systems. The first torpedo ignores the decoys. It locks onto the specific acoustic frequency of the flagship's drive shaft. It makes a final sharp turn upward, ascending from the depths like a shark breaching for a kill. It closes the final 100 yards in a heartbeat. 06:15 hours, airspace above Macclesfield Bank. The low cloud ceiling shreds apart as 4 Allied strike fighters punch through the overcast. They dive in a steep, aggressive formation, engines in full afterburner. Shock diamonds glow blue-white in the exhaust plumes. Inside the cockpits, the pilots breathe heavy, rhythmic rasps into their oxygen masks. Their heads-up displays flash with red targeting boxes. Below them, the battle is a tableau of fire and smoke. The burning Allied frigate leaves a black scar on the ocean. Tally-ho! Bandits, 3 o'clock low, the squadron leader transmits. 2 hostile interceptors rise from the deck to meet them. They climb vertically, banking hard to bring their nose cannons to bear. The closure rate is insane, over 1,200 miles per hour combined. There is no time for long-range engagement. This is a knife fight in a phone booth. The Allied jets break formation violently. 2 pull high, straining under 9 Gs. Vapor trails rip off of their wingtips like torn cotton. The pilots grunt as their G-suits inflate, squeezing their legs to force blood back into their brains. The hostile jets try to follow the maneuver, but they overshoot the turn. Fox 2! A heat-seeking missile leaps from the rail of the lead fighter. It snakes through the air, trailing white smoke, hunting the exhaust of the enemy jet. The hostile pilot reacts instantly, dumping flares, bright magnesium stars that burn white-hot against the gray sky. The missile wavers, seduced by the decoys, and detonates harmlessly in the cloud of chaff. But the distraction is fatal. The second Allied fighter rolls inverted. The pilot lines up the hostile aircraft's spine in his glowing green reticle. He pulls the trigger. The 20mm rotary cannon in the nose erupts. A buzzsaw vibration shakes the entire airframe. Tracers pour out like a fire hose. The rounds impact the enemy wing root. The fuel tank ignites instantly. The wing shears off in a violent explosion of aluminum and burning jet fuel. The hostile aircraft spins wildly, engulfed in orange flame, before plunging into the sea with a massive splash. The remaining Allied fighters level out just 50 feet above the waves. They scream over the hostile frigates at 600 knots. The jet wash whips the ocean surface into a frenzy. The pilots drift their sights over the enemy decks. The cannons roar again. High explosive rounds stitch a line of destruction across the hostile superstructures. Radar dishes shatter. Bridge windows explode inward. Crewmen on the decks are cut down or forced to dive for cover as the pavement rips apart around them. 06:30 hours. Bridge of the hostile flagship. Smoke from the strafing run fills the command deck, stinging eyes and lungs. Glass crunches under heavy boots as officers scramble to restore order. The fire control radar is dead, a twisted wreck of metal hanging off the mast. Sparks shower down from a severed conduit in the ceiling. The captain shouts into a dead handset, then throws it against the bulkhead. He grabs the railing, looking out at the oil-slicked water. "Torpedo! Starboard quarter!" a lookout screams, pointing a shaking hand at the water. A white wake streaks toward the ship like a scar on the ocean surface. It is fast, relentless, and impossible to dodge. The ship tries to turn, the engine straining, but the momentum is too great. The wake disappears under the hull near the stern. For a split second, there is silence. Then, the ocean erupts. The heavy torpedo detonates beneath the keel, directly under the engine room. The explosion does not just punch a hole, it breaks the ship's spine. A massive bubble of expanding gas lifts the 4,000-ton vessel bodily out of the water. The steel hull screams, a terrifying metallic shriek that drowns out the blast itself. The ship bows upward in the center, hogging violently, before the keel snaps with a sound like a cracking whip. The vessel slams back down into the void created by the explosion. The shockwave hurls the bridge crew across the deck. Men smash into consoles and bulkheads. The captain is thrown against the radar plot, his ribs cracking audibly against the steel edge. A column of water, mud, and debris shoots 300 feet into the air, hanging there for a moment before crashing down onto the ruined deck. The stern section, severed from the main hull, immediately begins to slide backward. It tilts sharply. The screws, still spinning wildly, rise out of the water, thrashing the air before disappearing beneath the waves. Inside the engine room, the ocean rushes in with the force of a freight train. Bulkheads collapse under the pressure. Steam lines burst, scalding anyone unfortunate enough to be near them. The roar of rushing water is deafening. The lights flicker and die, plunging the interior into absolute darkness. On the surface, the main section of the ship lists 40 degrees to starboard. It is dying. Fuel leaks from the ruptured tanks, igniting on the hot metal. A wall of fire races across the water, surrounding the sinking vessel. Sailors leap from the rails, hitting the water in desperation to escape the flames. The bow rises slowly, pointing toward the gray sky like a tombstone. 0645 hours, Macclesfield Bank debris field. The heavy gunfire stops. The silence that follows is not quiet. It is filled with the roar of uncontrolled fires and the shouts of men in the water. The surviving hostile frigate turns hard to the north, its superstructure twisted and smoking. It flees into the lingering fog bank, abandoning the burning wreckage of its flagship. The Allied destroyer does not pursue. The priority shifts instantly from combat to rescue. "Ceasefire, all engines ahead 2/3, the Allied captain barks. "Set rescue and assistance detail." The destroyer cuts through the chaotic water. The bow pushes aside floating crates, shredded life rafts, and twisted metal. It pulls alongside the burning Allied frigate. The heat is intense, radiating across the gap like an open furnace. Paint blisters on the destroyer's railing. Damage control teams rush to the edge. Fire hoses erupt, sending high-pressure arcs of seawater across the gap to battle the inferno raging on the sister ship. A rescue helicopter thunders overhead. The rotor wash flattens the black smoke against the water. A rescue swimmer sits in the open doorway, flippers hanging over the edge. He jumps. He plunges 40 feet into the oil-slicked swells. He surfaces instantly, spitting brine, and strokes powerfully toward a group of survivors clinging to a piece of floating hull plating. On the destroyer's fantail, sailors throw cargo nets and lines over the side. Survivors grab the ropes, their hands slipping on the oil. They are hauled up, hand over hand, straining against the weight of their waterlogged gear. A sailor tumbles over the rail onto the steel deck, coughing violently. He is soaked in fuel. A medic rushes forward, dropping to his knees. He rips open the sailor's vest with trauma shears to expose a shrapnel wound. He packs the injury with gauze, his hands moving with rapid, bloody precision. The sun finally burns through the last of the mist. The light reveals the full devastation. The Allied frigate lists heavily to port, the ocean washing over its main deck. The hostile flagship is gone, leaving only a massive slick of oil and debris. The sea is calm again, indifferent to the violence. 700 hours. Recovery sector. The smoke is thinning, but the air remains thick with the smell of burning plastic and raw diesel. The Allied destroyer stands as a towering silhouette amidst the carnage, its hull scarred by the earlier collision. On the aft deck, the triage center is a scene of controlled chaos. Medics kneel in pools of salt water and blood, their uniforms soaked through. They work in grim silence, moving from one wounded sailor to the next. The deck vibrates as the heavy helicopter engines drone overhead, its winch cable humming as it hauls up a litter containing a critically burned engineer. "Keep that pressure on the femoral artery," a chief pharmacist mate yells, pointing a blood-stained finger at a young seaman. "Don't let go until I tell you." Nearby, the destroyer's searchlights cut through the remaining patches of mist, illuminating the dark water. The light catches the orange of a life vest. A swimmer in the water signals with a flare, the red phosphorus hissing and spitting. A motor whaleboat from the destroyer bounces over the swells, its crew pulling survivors from the grease-slicked sea. The survivors are silent, their faces masked by shock and exhaustion. They are hauled over the gunnels like heavy cargo, shivering violently as the wind hits their wet skin. On the bridge, the captain stands perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back. He stares at the burning frigate. The smaller ship is losing the battle against the sea. The list has increased to 20 degrees. The water is now lapping at the base of the 5-inch gun turret. Internal explosions rumble deep within its hull, muffled thuds that send fresh plumes of sparks shooting out of the jagged missile hole. Captain, the frigate's CO reports the main transverse bulkhead has failed, the communications officer says, his voice low and heavy. They are abandoning ship. The order is relayed via megaphone. Across the water, the crew of the frigate begins to slide down the high side of the hull. They jump into the churning water, a line of bobbing heads moving away from the doomed vessel. The destroyer's crew watches in a somber, silent line. There is no cheering for the victory, only the stark realization of the cost. The frigate groans, a long, mournful sound of twisting iron that echoes across the bank. 0730 hours, final plunge. The sun is now high, turning the South China Sea into a brilliant, deceptive blue. The Allied destroyer has pulled back to a safe distance, its decks crowded with the shivering survivors of the task force. A soft wind carries the last of the acrid smoke away to the east. The ocean is reclaiming the battlefield. The frigate is nearly vertical now. Its bow points toward the clouds, the anchors hanging uselessly from their pockets. For a moment, the ship seems to hesitate, balanced on the edge of the abyss. Then, with a final violent hiss of escaping air and steam, the stern settles. The water rushes into the open hangar bay, the weight dragging the ship down. It slides backward into the deep, the ocean surface boiling and foaming over the disappearing mast. A massive air bubble erupts, throwing a geyser of spray 30 feet into the sky. Then, there is nothing but an expanding circle of white foam and floating debris. On the destroyer's bridge, the captain removes his cover. He bows his head for a brief silent moment. Around him, the bridge crew follows suit. The silence is absolute, broken only by the steady mechanical clicking of the gyro compass and the distant cry of a seabird. "Status of the hostile fleet?" the captain asks, replacing his cap. His voice is cold, returning to the business of war. "The remaining frigate has cleared the bank, sir," the tactical officer responds. "Radar shows them retreating toward the mainland at high speed. No further air or subsurface contacts." The captain nods. He looks at the jagged, torn steel of his own bridge wing, then out at the horizon where the enemy disappeared. The Battle of Macclesfield Bank is over, but the war is just beginning. The geopolitical lines have been redrawn in blood and sunken steel. "Set a course for Subic Bay," the captain orders. "Notify Fleet Command. We are returning with survivors. And tell the crew they did their duty." The destroyer turns, its engines humming with a deep, resonant power. It leaves the debris field behind, its wake a white scar on the blue water. The fog has completely vanished, leaving the Macclesfield Bank empty and still, as if the violence of the morning had never happened. Only the oil slick remains, shimmering like a rainbow on the surface, marking the grave of 2 ships and hundreds of men.